All right, so looks like I am live here. Make sure I got the chat window open. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is my first live Q&A on YouTube. And what I want to do is I'm going to keep this at a half hour, and I'm going to talk about some things that I've seen people bring up to me in conversations and also talking with clients. And I'm going to go over those. If somebody has any questions or anything like that, they can certainly ask that. But I'm going to start going through some things that are, again, have been questions and things that customers have talked about. People have asked me questions about here on YouTube, and stuff that I've responded to, and things that are top of my mind. And so before I get into that, though, I want to mention that I'm about to upload a video that's been long in the works, and it's about maintaining Microsoft 365. So just to give you some idea of what's been involved in that, the video itself is crazy long. It's an hour and a half, and I know nobody wants to watch a 1.5 hour maintaining Microsoft 365 video, but there's an orientation and then there's demos with that. And so the demos go through 9 different portals and 44 different checks that are part of our maintaining Microsoft 365 process. And so I take you, not in super deep detail, but I take you through all the parts of that we do at Xerillion. And the idea is that if you want to get into a Microsoft 365 system, if you want to get beyond just doing email and the Office desktop apps for everybody, which is what 99% of Office 365 implementations are, then that's what this video is about. Because what we need to do as IT people is move away from a keep the lights on IT mentality and working with servers on premise. We need to get to a point where things are moving to cloud services, but they're much more sophisticated, much more capable, and there's a lot more to maintain and manage and watch out for. So I'm going to take that video, I'll post it up there in its current edited state, which even edited, it's just under an hour and a half. But I'm also going to have a couple different cuts with that. I'm going to have a cut that's just the demos. I'm going to have a cut that is the video without the demos. And then I'm actually going to cut out the sections for the 9 different checks. So the Office 365 Message Center, Azure Active Directory, Identity Protection, Microsoft Security and Compliance, Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Those 9 different portals that we have to go through when we're doing our maintenance plan at our maintenance plan at Xerillion, and we're doing our Confident Cloud Advantage Managed process. I'm going to take those 9 sections and pull that out. So there's going to be a lot of videos that are uploaded that came out of this. So look out for that, and that should be within a few days. I'm just about in the final processes of editing that. And also, I'm going to be headed to Microsoft Inspire next week. And so I'll arrive there on Sunday, and I'm going to be there all the way through Thursday. And it's Microsoft's annual partner conference. And this is where lots of big announcements happen. I'm certainly going to be looking for new technology, things that I think would be beneficial to our clients, things that would be beneficial to our practice. But certainly for Microsoft, all the effort is around their cloud systems and their cloud services. And so I'm going to be deep into it from early in the morning all the way through the evening. And even when the sessions are over, the main sessions are over during the day, there's things to go to through the evenings that has everything to do with where Microsoft's going, their vision, and how they're implementing Microsoft cloud technologies. So if I come back from that, I'm going to take the best nuggets from that. I'm going to make a 1-slide video about that, the best parts of it, and I will post that up as well. So also with the videos, starting from here on out, because the Maintaining Microsoft 365 video was such a big one to get done, I'm going to be hitting Azure pretty hard from this point. For sure, I believe the future for cloud services, cloud systems and IT is about cloud services. So Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, the Microsoft phone system, Microsoft Teams, all these cloud systems that Microsoft manages. Whether you're a brand new company or whether, with a handful of people, or you're a company that has tens of thousands of users, everybody needs Microsoft 365. Azure is key for companies that want to build new web applications or born in the cloud applications or mobile applications. But what it does for us is that any of our customers that have Windows applications that need to be virtualized, we move those up into Microsoft Azure. And so I have several Azure videos up there, but I'm going to be hitting that hard now going forward after this maintaining Microsoft 365 videos. The videos are uploaded. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to talk about some of the questions and comments and things like that that are top of my mind that people talk about and ask about. This one's a big one here. Where do I find deleted files protected by retention policies? So I have a video out there which talks about rethinking your idea around backups inside of Microsoft 365. So when you do backups typically inside of your on-premise system, you'll have some sort of backup system that backs up files, changes in files. You might have a newer system that like a data system, which looks for sector by sector changes on the hard drives and keeps those onto a local device and then replicates those off to the cloud. We don't use those inside of Microsoft 365. We use retention policies to quote unquote back up our data. So backing up our emails and our files, those are the two key things. And so the question comes up, well, how do I go find that data if somebody accidentally deletes it, purges it, accidentally or intentionally? Well, when you're looking for files, if you've set up retention policies and you're beyond the default setup that Microsoft has, and you actually have an enterprise version subscription of Office 365, then you actually would look in the preservation hold library. It's the preservation hold library is where files that are deleted and they're no longer in the recycle bin but are protected by retention policies go. And only administrators have access to that. So that's where you're going to find that. The preservation hold library is where you're going to look for those files, but you have to have a retention policy set up. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of the default retention policies, which are you take a file, you delete it in a SharePoint document library or Teams, which is also SharePoint, but you delete the file, then it goes into a recycle bin. It'll sit there, and there's a first stage and second stage recycle bin. It'll sit there for up to 90 days, and then it's permanently removed from the system. All right. So again, the preservation hold library, that's where you're going to look for those files once they're no longer in the recycle bin and you have a retention policy on your files. The other question is, where do I find deleted emails protected by retention policies? All right, so that goes in a special folder inside a recoverable items mailbox, recoverable items folder inside your mailbox. And that one you can't just go in and look at. Where you to get those emails that are also protected by retention policies. So for example, at Xerillion, our email is set up to hold our files for a period of 7 years, even if they're deleted. So that once that goes in recoverable items, and from there the user doesn't see it anymore, but what we can then do is we can go in and do an e-discovery search on those files, and e-discovery search on those emails and pull them up. So that's where we'd actually have to go to bring up those emails if you're looking for them. Another question is, how do I know if my retention policies are actually working? So to know your retention policies are working, I have this in the Maintaining Microsoft 365 video. You've got to go in the Security and Compliance portal, and that's where you're going to make sure that emails, files are actually protected by retention policies and they're actually firing and executing. That's where you have to go to look for that. Next question is, Wayne, where do you store your company files, Teams or in SharePoint? we went through a situation where we started with a file server, then we moved into, we moved into box.com, and then from there we moved into SharePoint document libraries, got that part figured out, and then maybe about 6-7 months ago, we moved those into our files into Teams files. So it's a different area. It wasn't just like a reconnect, a shortcut. We moved the pertinent files that we need. We moved those into Teams files, and that's where we have them now. Now, we still access them through Windows File Explorer using a sync with OneDrive, files on demand. So whether your files are in Teams files or whether your files are in SharePoint, we still access files. We can still access files through Windows File Explorer, and it still very much looks like map drives, which is the holy grail, and that's what people want us to get set up for them when we move their files into Office 365. They really, really want that map drive experience inside of Windows File Explorer. They want to be able to do drag and drop and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we get them. That's what we give them. But I used to put things into SharePoint document libraries. Now we put those into Teams files. And, you know, it gives you an opportunity at some point down the road to just go ahead and make a full migration and start really using Teams to drive productivity in your company, to drive collaboration. And for Teams, if you can use your texting app on your phone, you can use Teams. It's so similar. All right. But what I tell people is these days, because they're always talking to us about getting their files moved into Office 365, and then we have that discussion, they're thinking SharePoint document libraries. At this point in our practice in July of 2019, I would prefer people move their files into Teams files. Again, we'll still make it look like it's files in Windows File Explorer, but that being said, the back end is Teams, and then they're set up at some point to go ahead and start really using Teams. So their files will be accessible in Windows File Explorer, and their files will also be accessible inside of Teams, which again, with the collaboration piece with Teams, is super, super helpful, and we use it extensively. All right, Wayne, what Microsoft Cloud technology in preview are you most excited about? So the biggest one that I'm excited about right now is Windows Virtual Desktop. So this was a big deal at Microsoft Ignite. Ignite is the technical conference that Microsoft puts on in the fall, whereas the partner conference, which I'll go to next week, is put in the summer. It's for partners like myself. And there was a couple sessions around Windows Virtual Desktop, which is a renamed version of Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-User. So basically, it's a much simpler version of remote desktop for companies. So right now, when we want to virtualize a Windows application, what we have to do is we have to go build an Azure virtual network. We have to set up a remote desktop server. We have to set up a domain controller. We have to set up another server to be a connection broker, license broker for the remote desktop services. We'll set up a file server. There might be a SQL server there for the application. But it's a bit of a setup. We're also going to be setting up a virtual firewall appliance like a WatchGuard or a Cisco Meraki inside that Azure virtual network, and then we connect up to the client's local network. So it's involved and it's a big job. Well, with Windows Virtual Desktop, there's no remote desktop licensing to purchase if the client already has Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3 or E5 or Windows Enterprise E3 or E5. They're licensed for this Windows Virtual Desktop technology, which is only available in Microsoft Azure. So we can go ahead, take those applications, move those up into Windows Virtual Desktop, and the client, it's like a 30% reduction in Azure cost on a monthly basis for the customer because there's no remote desktop services to purchase. There are licensing to purchase. There are no Windows operating system licenses to purchase. We just purchase the compute. And I remember in the sessions at Microsoft Ignite, the interest was so huge in this technology for all the technical people that were there. There was a couple sessions I couldn't get into. They were just packed. So I think that's going to be a big deal for all of our clients and prospects that have legacy Windows applications that they would prefer to be in web-based applications if they could. But again, if the company's been around 10, 15 years, they probably have Windows applications they're working with, and they want to get all of their infrastructure moved over into the cloud. And so the last pieces are going to be these Windows applications and a domain controller, a SQL server, something like that. We can get that moved over to Windows Virtual Desktop, and it's going to be considerably less than we used to have when we would put those applications up in Microsoft Azure. And it's also the simplicity. It's a lot simpler to put in place as well. It isn't as complex as the remote desktop solutions that we had to put in place up to this point, and we still do. Currently, it is in public preview, which means it's only in a couple data center regions. I think it's Iowa and Virginia, and it has no SLA tied to it. So Microsoft has financially backed service level agreements with stuff that's in general availability, and then if Microsoft misses SLA, they refund money to you. Well, right now Windows Virtual Desktop doesn't have that, but soon as that comes out, we're going to be testing it here, and then we will be rolling that out soon. It's supposed to be in general availability this fall, as I believe what they're shooting for. One of the things that I want to touch on is Azure Active Directory is your cloud services firewall. Identity is your new firewall. It's a very important point. It amazes me right now how few companies still have multi-factor authentication in place. Considering they're moving their email up to the cloud, hackers know this, and what they want to do is try to see what they can do as far as getting money out of the company. And it starts with a phishing campaign, phishing email, and just seeing who's going to respond to these things. Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, is the gateway to your cloud services, and you've got to treat that like your firewall. So if Azure Active Directory right now, for most of the people who have Office 365, they have the free version of Active Directory, which is literally a listing of usernames and passwords. The usernames are email addresses, which aren't hard to find, and then passwords that never change. And nobody's enabled multi-factor authentication on that. So, Microsoft sees that, well, this user normally connects in from Austin, Texas. Today, they're connecting in from Beijing, China. Maybe that's a legit connection, but the system sees that. And right now, if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, there's no challenge on that. If that person finds your username and password somehow, or you give it up in a phishing campaign, that's it. They have access to the mailbox, they have access to your files, they can do whatever they want to do. And multi-factor authentication comes with any subscription of Office 365. But you've got to treat Azure Active Directory as your new firewall. So for companies, ultimately at the end of the day, when they work with us at Xerillion, we're taking their emails, files, phones, security, management. That's all getting moved into cloud services inside of Microsoft 365. So then those cloud services, we don't put a firewall in front of it, is protected with Azure Active Directory. So you've got to look at identity as your new firewall, and identity is controlled by Azure Active Directory. And you've got to be in there, and you've got to be checking that regularly. And if you can swing it, I would get Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2 and get the identity protection with Azure Active Directory. So if you have the identity protection, then you also get, and that's on an a la carte basis, it's $9 per user per month. Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1 is $6 per user per month. Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2 is $9 per user per month. I won't go into why you'd even get the premium over the free or basic version of Azure Active Directory, just to keep this moving along. But Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2 with the identity protection, then it says, well, not only do I see you're trying to connect in from a device I haven't seen you connect in before, so I'm going to challenge that with multi-factor authentication. I also see that I'm looking at how you're connecting in. Somehow you got in, but it's different than your normal pattern of behavior. Now, if the system sees that, it can also say, well, you got in, that's great, but I'm still going to go ahead and challenge this a different way. Maybe I force a password reset. I log you out of all your connections inside of Office 365, or I disable that account. If the system sees that, for example, you're logged in today from Chicago and Austin, Texas at the same time, well, how did that happen? I don't know, but if the system can see that and it knows that's not a normal thing for you, what do you want it to do? Azure Identity Protection can see that, and you can set rules to act upon that. Also, it can gauge your user risk. If you or somebody in your company accidentally gave up, or you didn't know better, you gave up your username and password to a phishing email, and then your username and password becomes available publicly on the internet, and then Microsoft can see that because Microsoft's scanning the public internet, scanning the dark web for credentials, usernames and passwords. And if it knows that and it finds it, and would you like it to say, well, I found one of your users' usernames and passwords available on the internet. I see that. Do you want me to go ahead and force a password reset for that user? You probably would. And that's really, again, why you need to look at Azure Active Directory as your new firewall and treat it that. It's an incredibly sophisticated system. It is the second check in our maintain a Microsoft 365 process. So if you can add that on to your subscription, if you just got a basic Office 365 Business Essentials, Business Premium, which I would not do. I would get the Enterprise, at least the E3 version of Office 365. But if you just have that, then you really should consider getting Azure Active Directory Premium plan too. And with that in mind, one of the questions that I have is, what blows my mind when I talk to companies for the first time? So this obviously isn't a question I get. This is something that just amazes me time after time after time after time. What amazes me is that 99% of the companies that we talk with don't have multi-factor authentication enabled on their computer network. So we'll talk to them. They're very interested in the cloud and all that sort of stuff. They like the videos about how we get things, files moved up to SharePoint, how we have this vision of a completely cloud service system in Azure and all that, and then the Microsoft phone system. And one of the first things I got to ask is, okay, among some other questions, do you have multi-factor authentication enabled? And they never do. Very few do. Let's put it that way. And also in the Maintain a Microsoft 365 video, I talk about how you can go in and look at something. The last check on our Maintain a Microsoft 365 process is Microsoft Secure Score. And in Microsoft Secure Score, the average security score across for all the global tenants in Microsoft 365 is 30 points out of 800. Now, to give you some idea, I think Xerillion's right around 400 points out of 800. You would imagine ours is probably pretty secure. And I talk about that in that video. The global average is 30. For the finance industry, the global average is like 40, which is incredible. All the banks, the wealth managers out of the world out there, most of them do not have even basic multi-factor authentication. A challenge to somebody logging into your account to ring your cell phone to make sure it's really you. It stuns me. When we talk about before we move you into this advanced system, get you inside of Microsoft 365, a couple things have to be in place. Everybody's got to be on Windows 10. At least not more than 2 builds behind. So everybody's got to be on Windows 10. Everybody's got to be on the latest version of Office 365 Pro Plus, and we have to have, at a minimum for security, multi-factor authentication set up. So, and also retention policies is a new concept usually when I bring it up. They've probably heard of it, but they don't understand how their stuff is backed up inside of Office 365. And the default policies are probably not something you like. It's 15 days for email, 90 days for files. All right. So typically people use the cheapest subscriptions, Business Essentials or Business Premium, and they think everything's good because they're used to keep the lights on IT mentality. But that's not good enough. You really need the Enterprise Edition at a minimum, just to at least get the retention policies set up for your emails and files. And that's a topic that's on another video. But these are the things that you need to get in place. So those are things I wanted to talk about. So I don't know if there's any questions that we have at this point. I'll wait a few minutes to see if any come up. If not, I'll go ahead and drop off here, and I'll join in our next live meeting, which should be 2 weeks from now. Okay, well, thanks for joining me here, and I'm going to go ahead and drop off at this point, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.